I never thought that Indiana Jones would ever be made into a movie again, and the biggest reason is the age of the main character, Harrison Ford. Older doesn't mean you can't act. But Harrison Ford is 80 years old, and I was wondering if he could pull off Indiana Jones, which is more of an action movie than a regular drama. I had my doubts about that. If you think back very far in Hollywood, there were movies that were mega hits that became series and became brands. One was the Star Wars franchise, the other was Indiana Jones. And what they both have in common is that they starred Harrison Ford, and I think Harrison Ford represents the quintessential American. He's not incredibly handsome, but he looks like the most typical American. That's not to say that Harrison Ford in either of those movies is doing a ton of action. It's more like he's struggling to survive. He's not really doing any martial arts or anything like that. Even Indiana Jones is just an archaeologist. What he does is he goes around the world and digs up ancient artifacts that are buried and puts them in museums at best. So he's not exactly getting rich. It's just that I'm a professor at a university, so I don't have any financial difficulties. Even ancient artifacts are coveted by humans because they hold secrets. It's even more so because there's a lot of power that can be gained by getting hold of these artifacts. The time period is World War II, so it's mainly about fighting the Nazis, so it's mainly about adventure, so there are strange installations or gadgets to see while traveling around. Especially when there are things that can only be seen or eaten in that area, so I would grimace when I saw that. Finding hints or codes hidden in the artifacts is what Indiana Jones does. He's an archaeologist, so he knows several languages and letters. I saw the first one, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was the second one in the series, and I saw it from the very front, and when you see it from the front in the theater, you almost have to lie down, so it was really exciting when he was dodging the big rocks as they were rolling by. Because there were very few screen configurations like that back then. I saw the third one in the series, and then I didn't watch the last one because I wasn't really attracted to it. And it's been 15 years now, so you can see how old the series is. The movie is set in the year 23, so naturally I thought the setting would be contemporary. The beginning is during the Nazi era, when Indiana Jones was at his most active. He stumbles upon an artifact left behind by Archimedes. He's trying to retrieve Longinus' spear from the Nazis, the one that's supposed to have pierced Jesus on the cross. Archimedes, who was a mathematician and philosopher, created the Antikythera, which can control time. He doesn't get to keep it. He gets to keep a piece of it, and then a lot of time passes. Indiana Jones has retired from the university, and he's been living alone, until Helena Shaw Phoebe Willoughby Bridge, the daughter of Basil Shaw Toby Jones, with whom he escaped the Nazis with the Antikythera, comes to visit. There's Jürgen Polar Mads Mikkelsen, who's been looking for Antikythera for a long time. He's a physicist who was instrumental in getting the United States to the moon. He's a former Nazi who was able to make it to America because of his science. So that's the backdrop. And that's when the US is sending a man to the moon. And that's when the adventure really begins. If you think about it, there are hardly any genres like Indiana Jones these days. It's a time when there are all kinds of heroes, flying in the sky, weapons coming out of their bodies, getting shot and dodging without dying. In that sense, Indiana Jones: The Fate of the Furious has Harrison Ford, who is already 80 years old, as the main character. So there is no over-the-top action. In fact, as I was watching it, I was thinking, would it be okay if there was a little bit of action? One of the reasons I thought it was old was the music. There's the classic main theme by John Williams, which is very famous, and almost all the other music is classical, which is inseparable from Indiana Jones, but that made it feel old. Other than that, the movie as a whole didn't feel like a recent movie. It felt like the 1980s, when the Indiana Jones series had been around for a while. Especially at the end, there's a part where we go back in time. Was it just me or did it feel dated? I think it was probably done on purpose. It's quite long with a running time of 154 minutes. I thought it was familiar, so I looked it up and found Antonio Banderas. I was skeptical because I was familiar with his voice and so on. They say that's the end of the Indiana Jones series. Harrison Ford is irreplaceable, so I think it's going to be a movie that I will keep in my memory.